I am a Black female CEO.
Say that with your chest.
Oh, the mistakes are thick and fast. When you're doing a lot, you're going to make a lot of mistakes.
Do you ever get like no FOMO?
No.
Welcome to another episode of Richer Lives, aka the show that teaches you how to use money to live your best life. I'm Vivian too, but you might know me as your rich BFF. I'm here today with founder and serial entrepreneur, Emma Grede. Emma, thank you so much for being with me here today. I'm so excited to chat.
Me too. I'm so excited to meet you and so excited to do this.
Before we dive in, for anyone who might not be in the know, Emma is the CEO and co-founder of Good American, founding partner and chief product officer of SKIMS, co-founder of Safely, and a guest shark on Shark Tank. Let's roll the tape back just a little bit. You grew up in a neighborhood that was, and I quote, devoid of aspiration and glamour. Yet your drive and tenacity has led you to have this incredible career. Where does that come from?
It was so much part of who I am as an individual. You know, I'd be sitting in Plaistow, but buying Vogue magazine. You know, I always had like a lot of aspiration and it was in me somewhere. I have a family that really nurtured that side of me. My mother was very much pivotal in those early stages of my life in encouraging that. You know, she would take me to museums or get me out in the galleries or even in the stores just so I could look at the clothes that I couldn't afford. And so it was really encouraged in me in a very big way in my childhood to aspire and to want for more. But it was also coupled with this idea that like you're going to need to work really hard because not many people leave where you're from and you're going to need to couple those aspirations with some pretty hard work.
It sounds like you derive a lot of inspo from your mom. Do you happen to have any financial lessons that she taught you?
When I was younger, I grew up, you know, it's like every £5 really mattered. This is back in the days where you would like write checks, to pay your bills. And she would sit down every weekend and go through her budget meticulously, you know, like planning out down to the pint of milk. It's like paying attention to what is coming in and what's going out, but also just knowing the price of everything. And still to this day, it's like I literally know the price of everything and I question the price of everything. Doesn't matter if it's like a massive big line item in the company or some, you know, powder that I got from Air One that I'm like, what did I just pay for that? Like, you know, so it's like I have a very interesting relationship with money, having come from not very much. I think that my relationship with money was set extremely early in my life. And that's what often happens when you don't have any. You're like, okay, like I got to figure this out. Like, how am I going to make money? And that for me started super, super young. You know, I was a hustler. I was selling this and that and trying to like make money in any way possible.
Is that why you think young Emma wanted to be rich, is to have the nicer car, the nicer house, or was there something deeper?
It was more about a sense of just get me out of here. You know, I grew up like in a place that was just not safe. And so there was that like critical piece of it. It was like, this is just not an enjoyable place to live. And then there was another side of where I came from that was very much like formative in the person I am and my personality and having this sense of like deep, deep community. That part of East London taught me so much that I've taken into my business life. Living by your word being king, having like deep principles and not wavering from those principles. And I think that's so much the type of leader that I am, the type of CEO, the type of company owner that I am, the type of investor that I am. So those things were really pivotal in growing up and sort of understanding like bottom line, what is important. And I think I always had like a value system that so much comes from East London. So it wasn't all bad. It just is like, I'm willing to take those bits of it that I need and I'll leave the rest behind. Thank you very much.
Yeah. What do you think is like the most valuable trait that you've been able to teach yourself or have inherently that has helped you in business?
Resilience. You know, because that's the truth. The truth of what my life is like is that it's a series of problems every day. No one runs to me and goes, Emma, it's all working perfectly. And we're like, killing it today. It's like problem after problem after problem. And you have to, you know, have an incredibly thick skin, not just to get through those days, but to show everybody else what to do, right? Like just as I would as a mother, I'm like modeling the behavior that I need to see with my teams every single day. And so having a really thick skin and then figuring out how to problem solve, how not to panic, how not to take things personally. Like I never ever think that like this thing happened to me. I'm like, this thing happened and I'm going to figure it out. I just don't take things personally. And that's because I've got a really thick skin.
Yeah.
Or I've taught myself to have a really thick skin.
Yeah. You got to take it on the chin and keep moving.
Yeah, you really do. Because again, oftentimes it's just not about you, right? You win some, you lose some. And like I said, if you're trying a lot of things, you're gonna mess up.
You've made a lot of great moves in your business career.
I made a lot of bad ones too.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask.
Everyone wants to talk about the good ones, but there's been a bunch of crappy ones
Yeah.
too.
Can you tell me about what you feel like is maybe your biggest mistake or biggest failure?
I've made a lot of mistakes. When I really boil it down, I actually think they always come from like underestimating the situation, underestimating what I really need, underestimating my own value. In my first company, when I set up ITB, I was always obsessed with what I needed outside of myself and thinking that I could potentially like buy that in, right? And then I remember when I opened my first office in LA, I woefully underinvested in that opportunity.
Yeah.
So I've just made a point, and it's really like such a habit of mine now to really digest my learnings. Like every single quarter I write down like, what happened? Why did this happen? And you'll find so many commonalities in that. So I've been like very, very good at digesting the information that I get and making sure those things like don't happen to me again. But the mistakes are thick and fast. And listen, when you're doing a lot, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And I almost would rather have the mistakes. The thing that I worry about most is not making mistakes, it's inaction, missing the opportunity, not taking a chance. And I've learned now that it's just better to take a chance.
You really were in an area that folks weren't even thinking about at the time, being the influencer space.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't even called influencer
right.
back then.
There was, what was the word for it?
I don't know. They were like bloggers. They were like just hot people on the internet. Like, I don't know. I don't even know what they were. These people didn't even have representation.
Yeah.
You were dealing with mothers and boyfriends of the talent in order to get deals done. And so for me, that felt like an amazing opportunity because I was used to working with talent and, you know, dealing with managers and agents and lawyers. And I was like, wow, look at these unrepresented people right now. And in that, there was so much opportunity. You saw the tides literally turning. You saw the way that brands were moving from working with traditional talent, musicians, actors, actresses. And so I really jumped on that very, very early, and I kind of saw the value it was bringing to brands in a unbelievable way.
And you were one of the first movers. Do you feel like that first mover advantage benefited you? Or do you kind of wish like, man, I wish I'd learned from someone else's mistakes first?
No. It was the first mover advantage that really ultimately was the game changer because I got to figure it out, right? There was no one saying, well, actually, it should be done this way because you couldn't compare those talent, those deals, those opportunities that were happening with traditional talent at that time. I got to make up the rule book and we would just do things. We just throw it at a wall, see if it sticks. You know, I remember the first time actually telling a client, I think instead of 10 influencers, we should book 1,000. And they all just looked at me like blank faces. Now, you wouldn't even blink at that. But if you go back to that time, it just felt like a ridiculous thing to suggest. And yet it was unbelievable. When you looked at the results that we were having for our clients at that time, it was like, let's she who dares, you know, and I just dared.
If today Emma could go back and give then Emma a piece of advice, like what would it be?
Just go faster.
Go faster?
Go faster. When it's your first business, there's an element of trepidation. There's an element of you having a lot of responsibility. And every time I hired somebody, I'd literally feel the pressure. Like I'd be like, okay, yet another wage that you need to like build enough money by the end of the month to pay. Especially, you know, it's like I was the girl that just went around poaching everyone, right? I was like, I need you, I need you, I need you. And when you rope someone out of a job, you're like, okay, well, I better make it work for you. And inevitably, you know, when I opened my office in LA and then swiftly had to close it 2 years later, that feeling is like never good. That was a massive knock, not just to the company and reputation, but also just to my confidence in my own ability to run a business. But you know, like I said, it's part of it. And you go through those things and you learn an enormous amount.
How do you balance going faster versus making sure you're taking the time to make the right decision versus the right now decision?
I don't. If I'm no, it's really true, actually. I mean, listen, I'm a person that likes to gather a lot of information. And I think now I'm in an amazing, privileged position with companies that are highly successful in that there are teams, right? There's data, there's insights, there's innovation, there's solutions, there's amazing people that I get to lean on. But back in the day when I was an agency of 5, then 10, then 50 people, you don't have any such infrastructure to lean on. And so you did just have to go and you did just have to wrestle with those mistakes. But I don't see that as a disadvantage. And in fact, I think that when I think about certainly my own traits as a female entrepreneur, I have been too careful. And so learning to take risks, calculated risks, but learning to just say, whatever happens, I can live with that. The embarrassment, a closure, a lost client, a big fat mistake, you know, a loss of income, like whatever it is, like none of it kills you. You just have to go with the punches. I don't sit here and regret any of the mistakes that I've made. It's part of it. It's part of the journey.
Don't mind me just writing that down in my notebook. I'm going to take that with me. Let's take a quick pause to learn how SoFi can help you chase big ambitions. Did you know that almost half of Americans don't have term life insurance? Which is crazy because these days we protect almost everything. Your phone, covered. Your pet, insured. Your air fryer, yep, even that comes with a protection plan. But what about your most valuable asset of all, you and your family? I'm talking about term life insurance, which could provide a safety net for your loved ones. You pay a fixed rate each month, and if something happens to you during the policy term, usually 10 to 30 years, your family gets a payout to cover things like the mortgage and other bills. Basically, it helps provide financial protection when you're not around. And I get it, thinking about this stuff isn't fun, but SoFi has teamed up with Ladder to make it easy. No doctor's visits or medical exams required for coverage up to $3 million, with policies starting at just $24 a month. Think of it like a what-if plan, because if your air fryer deserves a backup plan, so does your family. Get the protection plan that actually matters at SoFi.com/protect. What? Really? So you have been able to create global brands with some of the most powerful people in the business world. How did you build that network?
I like to make a very important distinction between networking and building a network. Sometimes we get on these ideas of, you know, like the more people I meet, the more I'm out there, the more dinners that I go to, like none of that works. I've been very purposeful about figuring out what I need in order to get something done. You have to think about it very strategically. You know, it's not about meeting a lot of people. It's about the people that you do meet and how you utilize those relationships. Not like having a random conversation, crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. It's about asking for what you need. And so I don't know that I've done anything so special. I just haven't made it a secret with what I want. And I'm very intentional. And I ask for it. It comes back to that thick skin and resilience, because it's not like I get it all the time. Oftentimes people say no, sorry, no. And that's okay too. Rather than, you know, go around thinking about what you need, hoping people understand your intentions, looking for mentors, looking for people to help you, you need to ask for what you want. And you'll be pretty surprised at how people gravitate towards you and often like lend a helping hand when you're very clear about your needs and your wants and your desires. And I think that's all I've done, really.
Can you like just walk me through how we can ask for what we want? Like, do I just slide into someone's LinkedIn DMs? Or?
No, I'm almost never sliding, like just not. But it might be a generational thing too. I've like once slid into someone's DMs and they ignored me. What I've done is leverage all the relationships that I had. So when I worked in agency land, you know, and I needed to raise money for my first venture, I went to my clients. I didn't know VCs. I didn't know anyone with any money. The richest people I knew were my clients. So I went back to them and was like, hey, remember me? I'm over here doing this other thing. And so really it's just being purposeful about who you know. And this is where reputation and like delivering and being, you know, true to your word actually really catches up with you in the best possible way. Because I think that my reputation for being great at what I did at ITB really helped me, because all those clients were like, yeah, like we'll look at your proposal. We'll, you know, see what you need. We'll potentially invest in your next venture, because I'd been excellent at delivering what it was that I was supposed to be doing for them in the first place. So for me, it's just about taking what you've already got and leveraging it into the next thing.
Is that what you did to be able to partner and launch Good American, SKIMS? Like, how do you get someone's, not only their attention, but their focus?
Well, I honestly think it's about being excellent. I get a lot of people that say, you know, like, I'd really love to like have this next job. I'm like, you know, the best way to do that? Be amazing at the job you have. Because I'll notice that. Like, I'm not interested in like what you want. And very few people are. You just have to be really, really good at what you're doing. And people will sit up and they'll notice, and then you'll be able to ask for the next thing.
So we're taking your tips. We are making our networks work for us. We have the attention of someone we really want to work with. They've decided they want to work with us. How do you decide how you split a business? What's fair?
Well, that's a great question, because what is fair? And is fair what we're optimizing for. I don't know. Like, that might be a question that somebody very fair would ask. I'm like, what do you want? What do you need? You know, I think people get obsessed with this idea of like full ownership. I'd rather own 20% of something than like 100% of nothing, you know?
Yes.
So it's like, what do you need to get the deal done? How are you enticing people to make something happen? And I think in the beginning, you have to do deals that you might not do that get you to the next place where you can do a better deal. All of these things are stepping stones. And so I try to have like a really long-term view in anything that I'm doing. And you have to be realistic, like know yourself, you know? It's like know your own worth, but don't be stupid.
Yeah.
Don't overvalue yourself, because you've really got to understand, like, what am I giving in this and what might that be worth? And that's just as simple as it is.
You also come from a very financially diverse background versus a lot of the folks.
I love that you say financially diverse. You mean poor.
Listen, you said it, not me.
I love that. I wish I'd have known that when I was little. I'm so financially diverse over here.
Yeah. You come from a very different financial background than a lot of the people you're often in rooms with.
Yeah.
How do you think that adds to your superpower? How does that help you?
My mum always used to say to me, you know, Emma, you're no better than anybody else, but nor is anybody better than you. And so that kind of information as a kid really stays with you. So I would walk in a room feeling like, regardless of my lack of education, regardless of what I, you know, knew or didn't know, or what I have or didn't have, I felt good going into the room because I felt good, intrinsically good about me and who I am and what my values are. But I do think there's something about the level of appreciation for what I have that makes me good at what I do, because I don't take anything for granted. There's just nothing in my life that feels like, this is like so normal now. It's like I'm a person that literally stops to smell the roses. Like every day, I know how lucky I am. I know where I came from. Most importantly, I know exactly where I'm going. And I have this sense of myself that I think is really useful, because every day I come crashing back down to earth. And I'm like good with that feeling. I feel like it's good for me.
You have built these amazing, incredible brands. Like, what do you think has set you apart from other just celeb-backed clothing brands? And how have you been able to understand your audience so holistically?
Product 1, product 2, product number 3. It really isn't about the mechanic, how you reach a customer. At the end of the day, those things really change. Business changed, how you reach customers changed. And so it really comes down to, are you creating best-in-class product? Looking at solving issues for customers, creating real solutions and creating real innovation. And people use those words very loosely, right? It's like, this is an innovation. This is a brand new thing. That stuff is incredibly hard to do. Having unbelievable teams and being laser focused on what it is that we're solving for is what sets the brands apart. The way that I think about it is that the product is everything. Everything else is window dressing. It's the icing on the cake. It's the cherry on the icing on the cake. You can drive customers to the point of purchase and get them to purchase once. But if you intend for customers to come back time and time and time again, then the product has to stand on its own. It has to deliver. If you ask me, like, what do we do uniquely well? We create like best-in-class product.
And before you can find a solution, how do you even know what your customers' problems are?
Yeah, no, I love that, because I honestly think that you have to design and solve the problems that you have, right? Like when I'm in a room with a bunch of women that are all talking about things that they want to solve for, that's when I get really, really excited. And I look at my office like this like little perfect data set of people, because we all know what we want. That's one of the best things about working, you know, in teams and being really honest with each other, because we sit there and we say, well, what do we need? Because chances are, if you need something or if something bothers you, then there's like a million customers out there that is also bothersome for. The biggest breakthroughs that we've had in our business haven't come out of like the data that comes from, you know, our customers. It actually comes from the people within the organization, and then us looking outside and saying, oh, there's a market for this.
So it's really a gut feeling. It's not like you're relying on analysis to know like what's the next big trend.
No, not always, no. It's and also I think that when you create things that don't exist, like you can't see them in the market and be like, oh, we're going to do that. It's like you're creating categories, you're creating product that just doesn't exist in the market. So it has to come from somewhere else, you know?
I feel like you may not divulge this to me, but what do you feel like the big next trend is going going to be?
I don't know what the big next trend is going to be. I think that what we've done unbelievably well is like create the trend. Who knew that everyone was going to want a nipple bra? And they do. Turns out everyone wants a nipple bra. You can be a leader or a follower. And I'd rather bank on taking the risk and being the leader and doing something that nobody wants than like following and getting it wrong.
To talk about one of your brands that is one of my favorites, Good American, size inclusivity. You were doing that to just an A+ degree when a lot of brands were actually limiting their sizing because it was starting to get really expensive to do.
True.
How'd you know that was the right move?
Well, sometimes there's things that you do as a matter of principle, but I've also taken so many learnings from what I saw not working. And so when I used to go on set and then, there'd be an amazing like plus size girl there being shot on set, yet the clothes didn't fit her and they'd be like cut up the back. I'd be like, well, that's ridiculous. There must be something that we can do to solve for that. So sometimes it's about seeing this white space and the opportunity. Sometimes it's about, a gut feeling. But the best ones are when you put those two things together, when you know there's an opportunity and you use your gut to create the solve for it. Good American was such a pioneer. We're going back 8 years ago. Body positivity wasn't even the vernacular. That wasn't even a phrase at that point. We created a company that we knew needed to be in the marketplace because we saw that women were being sent up to the 5th floor of some department store and they're given this tiny little corner of really ugly plus size stuff. But we also realized that there were women at the other end of the size spectrum who were in like a double extra small that were also cut out. And it's like, again, the petite section was like this horrible little corner. And so the idea of Good American was really born out of this idea of like, be what you need to see. And so we just went for it. And again, I always have this litmus test that when things are really difficult, you should probably lean in. And Good American was so difficult. We would get our specs sent back all the time because nobody understood the measurements. They'd say like, you have this wrong. And we were like, no, we don't. It's just a plus size 22. And they'd say, well, you can't do that in a seamless way. You'd have to make that bodysuit differently. And we'd be like, okay, what do we need to do? And they'd be like, well, you can buy a new machine. And we'd be like, okay, well, then we'll buy the machine. So we ended up like owning all of this machinery in factories in China and Vietnam. So it was just really extraordinary. But I kind of had the feeling that if we'd put in the effort, that customers would reward us on the back end with their loyalty. And that's ultimately what happened.
And how has that focus driven the products that ultimately have been rolled out through Good American?
I think that we're always listening. We're always taking that feedback. And I think that that can be really difficult in a business because you get fantastic feedback, but you also get really bad feedback too. And you can't pick and choose which bits to listen to. So I think that we made it a principle of the company right from the outset that whatever feedback we got, we'd take it really seriously and we'd make business decisions based on that. And I think it's actually been one of the things that customers really respect us for because they're like, they are listening to me, therefore they're my people.
There's so many positives to be focusing on body inclusivity, but has there ever been any backlash?
Listen, there's backlash in everything, right? You had the brigade that were like, you are, supporting obesity. My viewpoint is that it's nobody's business what size you are. It's nobody's business what you decide to do with your body, your face, your hair, your anything. We were just going to make the clothes and the customer would come. What are you solving for? What are you optimizing for? And who are you trying to please here? I only care about what my customers think. And I'm like, if you're not a customer, I don't care.
What lessons were you able to then take from Good American to SKIMS?
So many, because I think that we understood a way of doing business that just wasn't regular in the marketplace. And as did the rest of the market, by the way, because everybody copied us. And that's a great form of flattery until you're like, oh, wow, that's just like really encroaching on our sales. So I really believe strongly that everything in your business has to change aside from your principles. So why you do what you do should never change, but how you do it has to change. In a business that's in like hyper growth mode, what worked a year ago isn't necessarily working today. And so I never rest on, oh, but I did this. Like we did this back then with Good American and it was amazing. It's like, well, now's a completely new day. So you have to constantly be in that like mode of taking everything in and always being open to do things like in a really different way.
The brand has really prioritized inclusivity across all other categories as well. What do you feel like people should take away from that? And how has that benefited or impacted the bottom line?
Well, look, I am a Black female CEO. And so there's an amount
Say that
of
with
this
your chest.
that's like, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I don't think I came into any of these businesses, thinking about being the benchmark of DE&I. What I thought about was running a company that I could be proud of. And there's certain values and principles that I have that inherently were in the company from the inception. Like, this is who I am, this is what I intend to do, and this is the way that I intend to do it. Now, it turned out to be a superpower. It turned out to be amazing for business, and it turned out to be exactly what was needed in the right time. But I always kept my eye on the prize. That was the way I did business, and it still is and will forever be the way that I do business, because that's what feels good to me. I am always trying to do the best by the company. That means hiring the best, that means making the best decisions, and we do all of that with the spirit and the intentionality of being a true reflection of our customer, not about meeting a charter or doing something for the sake of doing something. It's about the heart and the soul of what we do. And so none of it was ever performative. It's just about like who I am.
It's woven into the whole company fabric.
Really is. It really is.
On that note, let's pause for a quick money tip. We'll be right back with more from Emma. As some of you may know, I've been in my fashion girly era lately. And let me tell you, hunting down the perfect bag, weirdly similar to finding a loan as a small business owner. In both cases, finding exactly what you need can feel impossible. I'll go down a rabbit hole, open a million tabs, and suddenly I'm looking at a bunch of nearly identical bags, but one has a zipper, one has an extra strap, one has pockets, and soon enough, they all blur together, and I can't even find which one I liked the most. Where is it? Shopping for the right financing for your small business shouldn't feel like that. Enter SoFi's marketplace. Whether you need a loan for working capital or funds to upgrade your equipment, SoFi helps you shop and compare financing options without drowning in tabs. It's like a one-stop shop for finding financing that fits your business needs. Oh, and no need to stress. We'll help you track down what you're looking for. With loans funded for more than 1,000 small businesses, SoFi's marketplace is here to help you explore financing options. Get started at SoFi.com/SMB. I recently read this study that there is something called a motherhood penalty and a fatherhood bonus. So in the workplace, when you organize who gets paid the most to least, if they all do the exact same job, it's fathers with families, then single men, then single women, and then mothers with families, because the assumption—
not in my organization.
And I was just going to ask, like, what has made you really want to work with so many other powerful moms? You've really chosen to uplift that community.
Yeah, I have. But also, listen, I feel like we can, you got to read the studies. We've got to understand what's happening out there. But as women, we have to take responsibility and advocate for ourselves. And I think when you have an enormous amount of people that work for you, you get a cross-section, you understand the baseline behaviors. This isn't to say that every woman is like this or every man is like that, but there are some behaviors that are pretty consistent. And I would say that I'm way more frequently asked about pay increases from the guys than I am from the girls. And so we can take that information on and, be really sad about it, or we can get up off of our butts and do something about it. And I think you have to advocate for yourself. Like, no one is thinking about what you need. And if you're waiting for your organization to come with pay parity and say, hey guys, I just realized you're in like the bottom 10th percentile, like, well, I need to lift you up. Like, what are you waiting for? No, it's like nobody is going to give you what you need. And so you have to be there and be very, very clear about what you need. As a leader, I think it's so much a part of my responsibility to create the culture for that to happen. I leave the office every single day at 5, which means that other women who have kids and maybe want to go home and, hang out with them or not, just go home and do something else. It's allowed, right? It's there in the fabric of the organization. If the leader walks out, then it's fine for everybody else to. There's a responsibility, certainly from leadership, there's a responsibility as CEOs and owners for us to advocate and make the conditions for women with kids to be successful. But you got to do it for yourself.
I feel like that is compensation in itself, being able to have a culture where you have the opportunity to do all of the things that will allow you to get ahead and succeed. And that's really valuable.
And it's like, I think I've spent a lot of my time thinking about how once, somebody's had a child, how do they come back into the workforce and be successful? And what does that look like? And it isn't the same for everyone. So you can have mandates, you can have charters, you can, talk about it a lot, but it's like, what does that realistically look like? And it's different for everybody. And so I create a very results-orientated culture where it's like, we just need to get to here. I don't really mind whether you're doing that between 9 and 5 or whether your most productive hours are like 9 p.m. to whatever. It's really just about being very clear about the expectations and then letting people have a level of accountability about how they're actually going to get there. And that's what I've seen work for most parents.
Do you have any advice for how women in the workplace can better advocate for themselves?
You have to be realistic. So I think having the understanding of where you are in your career, having an understanding of like other like competitors, what people are being paid, arming yourself with information and learning, right? Being very, very purposeful about learning and developing yourself constantly. Because I do feel sometimes what happens is that you can get left behind. Things shift so much that somebody that was amazing at their role 3 years ago is now kind of out of date and obsolete in some ways. And so I think you have to take responsibility for that continual learning so that you are right at the forefront of where you need to be in your specific vertical so that you can ask for what you need and be respected that you're like right at the top.
What changes would you like to see societally, more broad, to like help working moms be able to actually reach their full potential?
When I opened my office in LA, there was a cupboard that was designated to lactation. And I remember asking someone, why do we need to have that? And they said, well, it's the law. When somebody comes back after having a baby, you need to have somewhere where they can, express their milk. And I was like, what about just allowing her to stay at home? Like, what about not asking her to come to work 6 weeks after she's just like pushed this child out? Like, wouldn't that be nice? And so, for me, immediately that was like the rewriting of our maternity policy in all of the companies that I've ever had, knowing what it's like to have a child. Like I can't even string a sentence together 6 weeks after having a baby. So it was going back to what are my beliefs? What are the things that I know to be true? And how do I implement that in a way that is going to make sense for my people? And you know what you get? You get unbelievably loyal people. Because if you've had 9 months to have this baby and to figure out how this child fits into your life, you are coming back to that workplace that allowed you to do that because you're set up for success. And so I think it's cultivated this unbelievable loyalty amongst the people that work with me. One of my proudest achievements is having people that have had 1, 2, or even 3 kids since they've been working for me and have come back and their career trajectory's gone like that too. And there are a number of women that I have in my organisation where that's been the case. And that's because we set it up to happen that way.
Speaking of women in the workplace, mothers, you are a proud mom of 4 kids. We've heard the phrase all the time, work-life balance. How do you do it? How do you do it all?
I hate that question. It's an entirely unfair concept, right? Because the idea that you balance means that you kind of have everything in check. I think the reality of my life, and I do say this all the time, is that it's a series of trade-offs. For everything that I'm doing, I'm not doing something else. And when you have 4 kids and you have a bunch of companies and you have other things that you care about and your own kind of aspirations, something has to give along the way. And so I do think you can have it all, but you can't have it all at the same time. We should just get rid of that whole phrase balance. I feel like if you asked me, I spend pretty much my entire life out of balance because I'm either doing all of this thing or I'm doing all of that thing. I'm either taking my kids to school or I'm just not taking them to school. And so the idea that you would like figure out some magical way of it being beautifully balanced and that you rid yourself of any mum guilt or you rid yourself of any professional guilt is unrealistic. I have all of those things, like all the time. I just choose to be a little bit kinder to myself because I know that that's the way I'm going to feel. And the reality is something's got to give. And so I try to make sure that I'm giving my all to whatever situation I'm in at that moment. And I've figured out a really great system for just what I should and shouldn't do. It's like I do a lot of no's all the time. And, I just balance that and say to myself, it's like if it isn't getting me closer to one of my goals, it's a no. Like, no, thank you, but no.
Do you ever get like no FOMO? You're like, oh, if I say no to too many things, the phone will stop ringing?
No, No, because it doesn't. And here's the thing, right? Sometimes you have to choose your choice. Sometimes it's more important to be, at something that's important to my kid than at something that's important to me. And that's a choice that I choose to make. And I'm very purposeful with those choices. But I also think I'm very honest with my kids about what my priorities are and what is important to me. And I'm teaching them through those decisions that it's okay to be a bit selfish and to put yourself first and to maybe not do what you need me to do because I have something else that's really important to me. And I think that's really difficult for mums and for women to say and feel all right with, right? You get this pang of being like, oh, but is it and if you do that to your kids, like, honey, I got to do this. What do you think's going through their mind? They're like, well, surely if that's your decision, it's not that important. When I have a big decision to make, I'm very clear about what that is. And so I've just decided to be very strong and very clear on the things that matter to me. When you can be really honest with yourself and say, I don't want to go home and do bedtime because I would like to do that dinner with my girlfriends. There's nothing evil and mean about that. That's just honesty. And sometimes I'm like, I want to go home and do story time. Well, that's all right too. But I definitely don't feel like that all the time. And so we just have to reckon with ourselves a little bit about what is the honest feeling here and how much of it is how you feel and how much is you fearing judgment from other people.
Ooh, I love that answer, even though you hated my question.
It's a horrible, horrible burden that's put on women.
Of course.
And again, it's not the same for men. And so I really feel that if I try to answer, here's all the tips and tricks that I have to balance everything in the day, that would be untrue to the way that I actually feel. Because the way that I feel is constantly compromised. It's constantly having to do something and give something else up. I've just become more at ease with that feeling of not doing something else. I'm like, that thing has to give. Sorry. Moving on.
We've talked so much about you being a mom, but you have an amazing partner as well.
Yeah.
How do you and your husband kind of balance and juggle, given that not only are you both parenting, you work together?
Oh, yes, we do. Ain't that the truth? Well, the thing is, first of all, I married a Swedish man. And I say that because in Sweden, it's a very matriarchal society. And so he was raised with the idea that men and women contribute equally in the home. It was never here's all these kids and figure it out.
Right.
It's these are our children and how are we going to split the responsibilities between us? So that was the starting point of choosing the right partner. And I was very purposeful about that. I was like, this is going to be a wonderful man to have children with. We've been together for 17 years. And so things change. And there are moments when he's been, incredibly busy and I've taken the lion's share. And then there's times when that has flipped. And again, it's just about being really honest and open with each other about what that is. But I never assumed, again, I think so many women assume all the responsibility. I never, ever did. I was like, well, of course, you're going to look after these kids. They're yours. What are we talking about here?
How would you define success? And do you think you've reached it?
So it would be ignorant if I said that I didn't think that I'd reached it. I've reached a level of success where I feel like, I know the lights are staying on and I feel really good about getting up in the morning to work with the people I work with and on the projects that I get to work on. I'm, of course, highly ambitious and ambition doesn't stop, right? It doesn't have a ceiling. You don't suddenly get someone and be like, I made it. You're like, what's next? Where's the next thing? So I think I'm hungry. It's I'm a hungry little monster and I love to think about what can I do and what are the opportunities and what can we do next. I just think it switches a little bit. It becomes so much less about me. Now that I can eat and I can do what I need to do, it becomes about how do you share some of that? And so thinking so much about where I come from and how lucky I got, I think about how those opportunities can be extended and how many kids there are that grow up disadvantaged, really poor, and what does that look like if they're just given a smidgen of the opportunity? If they get to step into some magical opportunity because they are, plucked out of where they come from, what does that look like if I was part of being able to enable that? Success becomes much less about me and much more about what else and who else I can affect.
Don't build a higher fence, build a longer table.
That indeed.
Emma, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I have a notebook now full of all of your jewels, all of your wisdom, and I know everybody at home has them too. So thank you.
Thanks so much. This was absolutely lovely.
That's all we have for today's episode. Let us know the top thing you learned from Emma in the comments, and make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons for more from Richer Lives. See you next time.
Fun and spunky. That might be my favorite phrase of this entire sit down. Guys, are we talking about my new project or not? So no. No, sorry, nothing fun and spunky to talk about. If I tell you, I have to kill you.